A lot of people think that superpowers aren't as great as they sound, that they probably just cause more problems than they'd solve. But on this channel, we disagree. We think superpowers would be awesome, and on this episode, we are going to decide which would be the best. Hello everyone, and today, this happened. Before I begin this episode, I should state that I realize this concept has been done and done until it's dead at this point. But the reason I am gonna go ahead and just do this episode is because I feel like no one has done it right. No one has ever covered enough ground with this, and I feel I could do a better job. So on this episode, I looked at all the possible superpowers that you could have. And I really thought outside of the box, umbilical cord powers, floss teeth, drills for hands. But I finally decided on four powers that I think would be incredibly useful. And there are a few rules to this. You can't be like God or anything like that. But basically, this is pretty much ruleless. This is as ruleless as I can make it. So, now I have to decide, of all the billions of superpowers, which is the best? Coming up with superpowers, I went through all the commonly accepted ones, like flight, invisibility, super speed. But there was one that I thought might be actually a great power, unlike the other ones. And that was super intelligence. Yeah, you could benefit the entire world with this ability, You could create machines that could change life as we know it. And maybe it would include things like creativity. You could create great pieces of artwork. Really, intelligence might be the greatest power we human beings have. And you wouldn't have to manipulate the world to use it, You could actually get away with having it without anyone realizing you had anything unnatural about you. But in all honesty, I would argue that the unnaturalness of a superpower can be what makes it extraordinary. And as much as in superintelligence would be useful in the real world, maybe something not from the real world should be the best power of all. Virtual worlds is one of those ideas that might actually happen. It hasn't been scientifically proven or anything, but as we continue to experiment with computers and video games, and as we continue to get more and more interactive with those things, it seems likely that at least some sort of virtual reality will be possible in the future. But this does ask the question, would that be the best superpower to have, to be able to make virtual worlds? I don't know necessarily if virtual worlds would interact much with the real world or how much they could interact, but even if we take that out of the equation, if we just say that the virtual world couldn't affect the real world, it would still be a very humbling experience to go to different places, to make worlds suited just for you. But of course, I think the rules here get in the way a little bit. Like, how much could you affect the real world with the fake world? And that's the reason why I couldn't put it up there. But if it was a virtual world that could interact with the real world, I think this could be the best superpower. But that's only if. When I originally was going to do this list, my first thought was time travel. Being able to travel through time, to maybe make things from the past enter into the future, to just basically be able to do whatever you wanted with time. Actually, what I've always wanted to do is be able to repeat a day. I think that would be very interesting, just a Groundhog Day power. Of course, I'd be able to shut it off, but yeah, I thought about it a little bit, and I realized that there are powers that are better than time travel, so it didn't make the list. But one that I realized would make the list that kind of has to do with time travel is being able to travel into infinite universes. So you could go into any kind of universe that exists out there. If you wanted money, if you wanted to be rich, you could go into a universe where maybe a material from this world would be worth a lot there. And you might think, well, the bills wouldn't, like, transfer well into this world. But if we consider the infinite timeline, there's infinite possibilities, so there would eventually be a world where money from that world would be identical to this world, and you could just go to that world and make yourself rich in this one. You could also go to world, all you ladies could go to worlds where there was only men, and you could just be surrounded by armies of men, and you could pretty much just do anything. You could go into worlds that are beyond even your imagination. You know, things that even you couldn't think of and could create in a virtual world. So yeah, I do think this is just an incredible power, and really, it honestly might be number one. I mean, this is a hard list, and I went through thousands of powers trying to decide which one would be the best. But I had one problem with this one. One problem, and that is you, and the fact that you could get hurt. And granted, you could go to worlds which are relatively safe, that would, still be fun to travel in, but there's just always that risk that you might get something wrong. And so I couldn't put it as number one, but I realized why some people would. This would be an incredible power, but maybe not as good as the number one spot. Stanley once said that the greatest superpower you could have was luck. And I agree with Stanley. And for all of you who don't know who that is, all you future people, he was this guy that made cameos in movies. But yes, luck would be a great power. It just means that you could do whatever you want and succeed in anything you wanted and have whatever you wanted, and anything else would be unlucky. And I realize that chance is part of what makes life fun. Sometimes getting the wrong answer keeps things exciting. But I would argue that that would be part of luck. That would be what you would consider lucky. So you could basically just make yourself as happy as you wanted with luck. I don't think necessarily that it necessarily means that you couldn't be unlucky at times. As confusing as that is, it would be what luck was to you. And it would also mean that you're probably not going to get yourself hurt. It's part of this world, but it's really not part of this world. And you would never be noticed by anyone. You wouldn't be considered something that was like divine or anything. No one's going to come out and try to kill you because they could just argue that it was just coincidence. And, of course, if there was an infinite timeline, you could visit those probably too at some point, because that would be lucky to you to be able to see those sorts of things. But maybe you could argue that's not part of the equation. Maybe that's pushing things too far. Regardless, luck would still be the greatest superpower. And yeah, there's a little bit of question to me whether this is the best. I mean, I still think traveling to alternate timelines would be cool, but hey, you know what? I think it's definitely up there. It probably is at least number one, and in the end, it's just luck. Luck is just probably the best thing you can have in life. Well, I have to admit that looking at all of these superpowers, the conclusion that I reach, in the end, isn't what I expect it to be. It's not that having superpowers is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if we were to have superpowers, it could be a good thing too. The way I see it, nothing's perfect in life. If you have suddenly the ability to fly, everything isn't going to be great, but there would still be good things that came along with it. And I suppose that it could be dangerous to have a superpower. If you could teleport, maybe you could teleport into an atom and cause a nuclear explosion. I don't really know the science behind that. But then again, on the other hand, just having the ability to teleport alone would probably change humanity as we know it. And humanity could probably use it in some way that could help all of society. So, yeah, I think superpowers should exist. I think it would be a much better world if they were real. But that's my 2 cents on it. I don't think most people would agree with me. But I do give you all this warning, that you have to be careful that you're not stating against something because it's a bad idea, but stating something against something because it's different. And I think that's what people are afraid of with things like superpowers and wizards and all that sort of stuff. They're afraid of something different. But of course, sadly enough, we don't exist in a world where such things are real, so we just have to be happy with it, I guess. But it would be really cool to have drills for hands.